Hello friends, continuing with our discussion on topic of fracture. This is the second lecture on that. Okay, so continuing with that, we discussed about the Griffith criterion for brittle material. Okay, and we said that failure stress will be given by a relationship like this. Okay, from Griffith theory. And then we also said that in ductile material, because there will be some plastic deformation ahead of the crack, this actually stress will be more while we are talking about ductile material. That means you will need more stress to continue the crack or propagate the crack. Okay, so it is always better to design your material or your whatever your structure you are designing, considering only the considering it as a brittle material, so that you are always going to give a conservative estimate. Okay, you will be always within the safe limit. Okay. Now, the problem with the Griffith equation here is that you have a parameter which is the surface energy, okay, the gamma s, and it is very difficult to kind of find out this in all kinds of material. If you change the composition, these energies will change. Okay. So, for each material finding out this energy is always going to be difficult. Okay. So, instead of that, another proposed idea is that we can calculate a parameter called stress intensity factor. Okay. And what stress intensity factor says that K is dependent on the whatever is your applied stress under root of the crack length. Okay. So, if it is the crack within the material, it will be the total will be 2C. Okay. So, half of that for inside crack. If it is a edge crack, already we will take the total length as C. So, it deals with the stress intensity at the tip of a sharp crack. Okay. Now, you can also define a critical intensity factor in this. Okay. So, this will be when the stress is sufficient to start the fracture. So, it is sufficient to start the crack propagation. So, as Griffith criterion has already assumed that we believe that there are going to be small defects, cracks inside the material. Okay. So, when the material fractures, basically these cracks are going to propagate. Okay. So, we want to find out a stress, okay, which is sufficient to propagate these cracks, and for that we can define a critical intensity factor. Okay. And with that will be, now we have changed the sigma applied to sigma f, that means the stress where the fracture is going to take place. Okay. And this is again the crack length. So, this is Kc is critical stress intensity for a factor for stable crack extension. Okay. So, instead of doing this analysis using surface energy, we can do an analysis like this, and we can find out the critical intensity factor for a given material. Okay. So, your value of K or Kc will depend on type of loading, what type of loading I am giving, material. Okay. So, for each material I can find out the stress intensity factor, critical intensity factor, and geometry of the sample or structure. Okay. So, what is the geometry of the structure is there. Okay. We will look into detail of all these three parameters. So, the first one, if you see, this is a 3 modes of loading. Okay. So, mode 1 is what we call as tensile mode. Okay. So, if a edge crack is there and you are applying a tensile stress over that, okay, so it is called a crack opening kind of mode. Okay. So, whatever crack is there, it is going to be opened by application of this tensile stress. Just a comment here that compressive loads are not that critical in case of fracture. Okay. Because when you are applying, suppose there is a crack also, when you are applying a compressive stress, actually you are closing the crack. Okay. So, it is not going to propagate. In tensile mode only it will propagate. That is why you will not see a compressive mode here, only a tensile mode. Then the second mode is the shear mode. Okay. So, basically I am shearing the material where the crack is there. Okay. So, when the mode 1 is there, then we critical intensity factor will stress intensity factor will be called as K1C, because we are doing it in mode 1. So, which mode we are doing, that also we can include in the definition here. Similarly, mode 2nd, when it is a shear mode, then it is a mode 2, okay, then I will call it as K2C. And then if it is a tearing mode, so it is a mode like this, okay. So, instead of shear mode like this, it is a kind of tearing mode, okay, and then it will be mode 3, so K3C will be written. Usually most important is K1C, which we will use in all the design practices, okay. So, if you want to consider this geometry of the loading and geometry of the specimen, okay, actually I can modify the equation here now, okay. So, it will be critical stress intensity factor, okay, equal to a factor which deals with the value depends on specimen and crack geometries, okay, and this is your critical crack length and sigma f your, as I told you, the fracture stress, okay. So, stress at which the fracture takes place or the crack propagation becomes stable. If a very sharp crack can be made in a material, so now how we are going to use this particular parameter, okay. So, initially what we will do is we will introduce a crack in the material, okay. So, suppose you give a material to me, okay, and ask me to find out the that what will be the critical intensity stress intensity factor for this material, okay. So, what we will do is, first we will make a specimen, introduce a crack of a known length which we have already introduced, okay, which we can easily measure. So, that crack length we will already introduce in the material, and then we will do test to find out that at what stress it is going to fracture, okay. So, when I do that, so under plane strain condition and tensile mode, which is K1C, I will find out that for a particular crack length what is your going to be the fracture stress, okay. So, by doing this kind of experiment, empirically I can determine that what will be the critical value of stress intensity factor, okay. So, for a given material I will get that. Now, once I get that, now I am using this material in practice, okay. So, there is in that practice wherever I am applying this material, there will be some applied stress, okay. By doing some non-destructive testing, I can also find out that what are the typical crack or defect present in that material, okay. So, by knowing this applied stress which you have found out from your design, okay, and finding out this crack length from some NDT kind of analysis evaluation, okay, and using whatever geometries we are using, if we are doing it in plane strain condition under tensile mode, then y will be under root pi, okay. I can calculate that what will be the stress intensity factor under mode 1, okay. Now, if this stress intensity factor is more than K1C, then I have to either change the applied stress, or I have to redesign my structure, or I have to do certain processing to the material to reduce the defect size. So, if K1 is more than K1C, if K1 is less than K1C for this given applied stress and the whatever defects are there in the material, then I can say that this is a safe mode and I can use this material under this stress condition with the given flaw size, okay. So, I guess you understood that how we are going to use this stress intensity factor to find out the whether I am going to or whether I will be able to use a certain material with certain crack length under certain applied stress, okay, and by comparing the critical stress intensity factor with the stress intensity factor we have calculated for a particular condition, okay. So, in books I have found that there is lot of confusion regarding these equations, okay. So, I have done whatever I have followed here is that K1, the 1 is your tensile mode and in plane strain condition, and C is your critical when we are talking about critical. So, when we are talking about critical, this stress should be the fracture stress, and the under root pi term comes only when I am using K1. Okay. As you can see here also I am using K1. Okay. Let us say I am not going to use K1 here, okay, and I will be using only K. So, y, when I put y as under root pi, then I will use it as K1. Okay. So, under plane strain tensile mode, okay, this is what I will get, and I can compare with the stress intensity vector which I am calculating and find out whether I can use this for a particular application or not. So, as I told you that in general I will write it as K equal to y sigma applied under root c. So, if it is a crack length center crack with length 2c in an infinite plate, so under plane strain condition, so one I can always use because one is for plane strain tearing mode tensile mode. Okay. So, one is for tensile mode, so I can use that, and y I will put only according to what kind of crack is there. So, if it is a center crack within the material, a through crack with length 2c in an infinite plate. So, it is a plane strain condition. For infinite plane, the condition for deformation will be plane strain. For another set of conditions, y will change. Okay. So, it is a edge crack. So, then I will use a factor like this. Okay. And then there are some values for the critical stress intensity factor. For steel, it is around 150 megapascal per meter under root meter actually. No, it is under root meter, and aluminum alloy it is around 37, okay, and their Young's modulus is also given here. Now, what are the common fracture modes? Okay. So, if you see there are different fracture modes, already we have seen once in the previous slide also, okay, just to recap here. So, in this case the crack is going through the grain, okay. So, and this is what we call as cleavage fracture through the crystallographic plane. Basically the crack goes through the crystallographic planes. So, as you can see a certain plane is preferred. So, it is going through that, in that plane may be oriented in a different way in next grain. So, the crack has kind of there is a divergence or diversion of the crack in that next grain, but the crack will go through the grain. Okay. So, in this case it is a transgranular fracture. The another fracture which is a ductile fracture can be there through necking process. So, it is necking, okay, and later on it will fracture when the diameter of the material become very small. Then this is the rupture by shear process, okay, under plastic deformation again. Then there is a micro void coalescence, we will see this when we will discuss the ductile fracture. Okay. Then there can be voids on the grain boundary. Okay. So, then it is intergranular micro voids or intergranular cleavage. So, in this case now the crack is going through the grain boundary, in this case the crack was going through the grains. So, crack can also go through the grain boundary, okay, then it will be intergranular cleavage. So, now we will look at a different type of fractures. So, first is brittle transgranular fracture, okay, that means through the grain. So, when you have a brittle transgranular fracture, okay, the crack is propagating along the crystallographic planes or through the grains, and usually you get a faceted feature with river markings. Faceted feature because the crack is going along a certain plane. So, you get one facet. In another grain the plane may be oriented in a different way. So, you get another facet and so on, and usually at macro scale you can see this kind of fracture very nicely on some rock. If some fracture is taking place or there is some crushing of the rock is taking place, as you can see very nicely these kind of facets are there on the rock sample at a macro scale. Okay. This is scanning electron micrograph of fracture sample, again you can see the facets. So, one facet, and wherever the grain boundary may be, or wherever the crack is going into another plane, okay, you get this kind of river marking. So, it kind of where the crack has changed its path, okay, there you see this kind of river markings. Okay. So, it is like tributaries to a main river, that is how they come and then they join the main river. Okay. So, that is why it is called river marking. Then a brittle fracture can also happen intergranular. Okay. That means the crack will propagate through the grain boundary. So, in this case you get a granular appearance, okay, because it is going through the grain boundary. So, the shape of the grain is actually what you see very nicely on the fracture surface. If you want to compare this kind of fracture with anything which you see in day to day life, you take a thermocol, okay, those white packing material in which you get all these electronic equipments, your monitor and so on, and you just fracture that thermocol, okay, just break that thermocol, okay, and whatever the surface you will see, that is how you will see a intergranular fracture. So, those individual thermocol grains, that is what you will see, and in that the fracture is actually taking place between the two balls of thermocol, okay, and that is what you will see very nicely, this kind of fracture feature. So, in this case the crack propagate along the grain boundaries. Okay. You usually why it takes place, suppose you if you remember, we discussed when we were discussing about steels, that in hypereutectoid steels the cementite form on the prior austenite grain boundary. So, it is kind of a continuous network. So, if you have this kind of microstructure, the cementite is a brittle phase, okay, and if any crack nucleates, it is very easy to propagate the crack through this cementite network, okay, and because this cementite network is on prior austenite grain boundaries, you will see a nice granular type of fracture features, okay. So, this if you have on grain boundary a continuous network of second phase, then the crack will sometime can propagate through grain boundary. In high temperature also this grain boundary fracture takes place, because at high temperature grain boundary is weaker than the grain, okay. They are already quite easy to separate at high temperature, okay. So, the crack propagates through the grain boundary when you have high temperature fracture, okay, in some cases, not always. So, in high temperature fracture also you will see this kind of fracture feature. Sometime it can be mixed mode also, you can get intergranular, you can get transgranular, okay. So, you can see these are all with faceted features, okay, you can see a faceted feature here also, okay. So, there can be sometime mixing of two different fracture modes also, because in practice things are not very simple, okay. You have very complex stress system, okay, material is experiencing different stress state at different places. So, the fracture can also be of different type, and if there are two multi-phase material, some phase will deform by or crack by transgranular mechanism, another phase may fracture by intergranular mechanism. So, you can get a mixed mode type of fracture features on the surface. Now, coming to the ductile failure, okay, or ductile fracture, this happens due to microvoid coalescence. So, we will see what do we mean by that. Give characteristic appearance of dimples. Actually, this is what we call what features which we see on the for ductile fracture, okay. We say that these are dimples, okay, it looks like dimples. Void formation due to presence of second phase particles, okay, and typical cup and cone appearance of fractured tensile sample. So, this we have already earlier also discussed, that you get this kind of cup and cone type of fracture. So, if you have a ductile material and you do the tensile test, you get this cup and cone fracture appearance, whereas if it is a brittle fracture, you will have separation of two of the sample in two parts, and almost the fracture macro features of the fracture surface is flat. Okay. So, what happens in this microvoid coalescence? Okay, basically when you are deforming and suppose a necking starts at some point. Okay. Now, there will be some this kind of microvoids which will be forming on the inside the sample. Okay. Why this microvoid form? Okay, suppose you have some inclusion in the material, let us say inclusion or precipitate or whatever, okay, and you are deforming. Now, the mechanical properties of the precipitate will be different than the matrix. Okay. Usually precipitates are all very hard compared to the matrix. So, matrix is soft, it can deform, whereas the precipitate will not deform. Okay. So, when you have suppose this is my precipitate, this is my matrix around it, my matrix is able to deform, but precipitate is not deforming, and there is an interface here, is not it. So, what will happen if it is able to deform, it will try to separate from the, my matrix will try to separate from the precipitate because it is able to deform, whereas precipitate is not deforming, it is kind of a solid inflexible precipitate within the grain. So, what will happen now, you have initiated voids at the interface, okay, and these voids initially these voids will be very small micron size small voids, okay, and when you keep on increasing the stress because of the necking, there will be the stress will be concentrating in this region, okay. What will happen that these voids will grow and they will start connecting with each other, okay. That is what we call as coalescence, okay. So, first voids will form, the small voids, micro voids, then they will kind of connect with each other, and you will get a region within the material which is now already separated. So, remaining material on the outside is remaining there, okay, and that will fail in a shear mode. Okay, you can see that this is typical 45-degree shear surface, as I told you already that when you have uniaxial tensile at 45-degree, you will get maximum shear. So, when the material is already separated from within, the remaining part will shear out, okay, and at 45-degree almost, okay. So, you will get a fibrous appearance here because of those microvoid, and they are coalescing with each other, and the shear on the outside, and this is what is going to give you a cup and cone type of fracture features. So, you can see that there is a flat region and then there is a raised region here which looks like a cup, and in this case it looks like a cone, okay. So, this is how the whole deformation takes place. So, now because of this microvoid formation and coalescence, okay, the typical fracture feature which you see in ductile material is called dimples, okay. So, these are individual dimples, and you can also see that there is a precipitate sitting within these dimples. That means the microvoid might have nucleated there, then it was growing. Another microvoid nucleated for this precipitate, that is also growing, and locally there is kind of a shear between the two of these holes. So, you have one microvoid like this, another microvoid like this, and when the material is whatever material is remaining between them, okay, that is very thin small volume of material that will shear out. So, because of that you get this raised portion here. Okay, so, this is a typical dimple fracture. So, if it is under tensile mode, simple tensile mode, then it will look like a equiaxed dimples. Suppose the same thing is failing under shear mode, okay, which we see in cup and cone at the extremities of the sample. Okay, so, this same dimples will under shear mode will get elongated. So, it will look like this. Okay. So, instead of equiaxed, you will get a elongated dimples, okay, elongated dimples when you have a shear mode. Okay. Now, there is another problem with few materials, and that is that they behave different under different mode at different temperature. Okay. So, this is what we call as ductile to brittle transition. So, in some material the fracture mode changes from ductile to brittle with decrease in temperature, and especially BCC materials are susceptible to this. Okay. So, if you see this is fracture energy, that means how much energy is absorbed by material during the fracture process. So, at high temperature it is behaving in a ductile manner. Okay. So, ductile is always safe. For example, if I have any kind of impact, okay, if it is a ductile material, it will only give a dent, okay, it will not break into two parts. Okay. At low temperature it starts behaving as a brittle material. So, now any impact on the structure it may fracture into, or there may be a initiation of crack. Okay. So, with temperature, and that is what happened with the Titanic, okay, because the material which was used under the when it was going through the Atlantic Sea, okay, Atlantic Sea, the temperatures and I think it was winter. So, the temperatures were low. Okay. So, in that temperature the material was behaving in a brittle manner. Okay. They might have done testing of this material, but they might have done testing at room temperature or little bit higher temperature. So, there the material was behaving like a ductile material. So, they used that material, okay. But when it went into the Atlantic Sea, okay, and when because of in the night the temperatures of the water must be low. So, at that temperature it started behaving like a brittle material. So, when the iceberg hit the ship, okay, it instead of just giving it a dent, okay, what it did is it is initiated the crack in the structure of the ship, okay, and that crack then started propagating, and then you had the that accident. Okay. So, now then of course, a lot of material research took place, people took care of that problem. So, at least they can bring the transition temperature to very low temperature, which you will not find in under the service condition. Okay. So, this kind of research keeps going on as you face some problem or other. Okay. So, the temperature at which this transition takes place is called ductile to brittle transition temperature, DBTT. Okay. So, basically we have to take care of DBTT for any material. So, when you develop a new material, you have to do testing at room temperature, high temperature, low temperature, under different loading conditions. Static quasi static loading means at very slow strain rate, high strain rate testing, which we call as impact. Okay. We can depending upon the application, if it is not going to see any high temperature, we will not do any high temperature testing of that. But suppose you are developing an automobile material, okay, I will test it under quasi static condition to design the structure, but I will also test under impact loading, okay, because under the crash condition there should not be any fracture in the sense that it will fracture like a brittle material. I want it to absorb maximum energy by deforming plastically, okay, and that is what we will see in the next slide. Okay. So, this is the ductile to brittle transition. So, the sample tested at different temperatures. So, at high temperature it behaves like a ductile material, and at low temperature it behaves like a brittle material, and the fracture morphology also changes. So, as a function of decreasing temperature. So, here you can see that it has a ductile fibrous kind of appearance, whereas in this case you have faceted and river markings are there. So, for the same material the fracture morphology has changed from ductile to brittle. Okay. Now, this is just one slide on the impact testing, that is one of the important aspect of any material development, especially for automobile, as I was telling you. So, basically our objective here is to find out what is the energy absorbed during the fracture. Okay. So, maximum energy absorbed is what we want. Okay. So, there is one type of test which is called Charpy-Notch test, okay, and this is the arrangement for the atom. You create a pre-crack kind of condition already here by providing a notch here, so that the stress will be concentrated in this region only. So, it is kind of trying to simulate that already there are flaws present in the material, and if you have a impact loading, how much stress it is going to absorb. Okay. So, and to do the test, a very simple apparatus is there. So, you have a very high hammer with a lot of weight is there. You take it to certain height. So, now it has some potential energy, and then you remove that so that it take a swing here. So, that potential energy will convert into kinetic energy. So, at this point it will have maximum kinetic energy, and it will hit the sample, and then it will go on the other side. So, whatever is energy absorbed in this fracture of this sample, okay, that much less energy will be there for it to swing to a certain height. Okay. So, that height difference will give you the idea about that how much energy is absorbed in this process. So, this is a typical impact testing. So, with that our fracture part is kind of covered. So, we have discussed about brittle and ductile fracture, we have discussed about the Griffith theory, and we have discussed about the stress intensity factor which we can use to design our structures. Okay. And if there is going to be any fracture, from the fracture surface we can find out that what type of fracture took place, whether it was ductile or brittle. Okay. Thank you.